Hello. I Hi.
Hi.
Oh my goodness. It is a time.
It is a time.
A time. A wrinkle
Oh, in time.
in time.
You know that when life gets lifey, I like to talk about
Uh-huh.
creatures and planets.
You love creatures.
I love a
You love them.
creature. Yeah.
And since there are lots of creatures in A Wrinkle in Time,
Aha.
and A Wrinkle in Time is what we are currently discussing in this series
In this,
of this podcast that
yes,
we like to call Pop DNA.
pop DNA, because that is its name.
That is indeed its name. Uh yes. Um oh my gosh. We've lost everyone now.
No,
They're all
they're
gone.
excited about it. I can feel
They're all gone.
I can
They're
feel
like,
it
oh, this
coming
is
in the air
too
tonight. Hold on.
this is too cringy.
No.
This is too cringy. I can't deal
No.
with these women who don't know how to introduce their
We
podcast.
are lovely, damn it. It's fine.
Okay. Yes, no, but you were going to talk about creatures because you love creatures,
I do.
great and small, and not of this earth.
Mostly not of this earth.
Perhaps Muppets.
Oh, I love a Muppet. In our discussion with Fictional Hangover, I described myself as a Muppet.
You are
I'm a Muppet.
you are indeed a
I'm
Muppet.
a Muppet.
Yes.
Come on.
For those who are not watching video, I was gesturing behind me to my labyrinth poster, which
Yes.
contains many creatures.
Yes. Which we
And could you term the creatures in Labyrinth Muppets? Because they were created by Jim Henson.
There is a war inside of me for the answer to that.
There's a more inside of me. Like, could you call Yoda a Muppet?
I
That's
don't
that's what I'm
see, I don't think so. I think
Okay.
Muppets TM are Muppets. And then I
Uh-huh.
think
It's
there
a
are
specific brand of creature.
because they had
Okay.
like the Muppet Show. You wouldn't see like a
Mhm.
Yoda or like anything from Labyrinth on the Muppet Show, although you should. Maybe that would be cool. But
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
think there are creatures who were born in Jim Henson Studios, and then I think there are Muppets. In the same way that like a Sesame Street creature is not a Muppet.
Uh-huh, sure.
It's a
But
citizen
where
of
are we
Sesame Street.
standing on Labyrinth
I think
then? Because Jim Henson,
I think they're distinctly
very
labyrinthian.
involved.
Mm-hmm.
Labyrinthian.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh I love Labyrinth.
I did. We have to talk about Labyrinth one of these
We
days.
do have to talk about Labyrinth one of these days. I think it's it might not fit into our discussion today, but I think that there is a case to be made of doing a side by side of Labyrinth and A Wrinkle in Time. Not just because of the creatures, but
No.
for other themes that are involved.
Yeah. Themes of loss of
Okay.
innocence, themes of like
Mm-hmm. Loss of innocence.
young female identifying.
Retrieval. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Who's like coming of age.
Yeah.
And like rescuing of a close family member.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And David Bowie is similar to the man with red eyes. Like they're similar.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And they both symbolize things.
Things and stuff. Mm-hmm.
Things and stuff.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
but how good is Michael Pena as the man with the red eyes?
so good.
Oh my gosh.
So good.
So good.
So Rhonda, what did we talk about
Yes.
last time?
Oh yes, last time we talked about how A Wrinkle in Time was formative to our childhoods. Labyrinth was also formative to my childhood.
Yeah.
And yours too. That says a lot about us, I think.
I know.
And then we talked about the The two film adaptations of A Wrinkle in Time,
Mm-hmm.
mostly the 2018 because it's recent and it's the one that everybody knows.
And it's
And
good.
then yes. And then I, of course, found an excuse to talk about religion.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Madeleine L'Engle was religious and wrote overtly religious themes
Yeah.
in her books. So I thought that was worth talking about. And then we talked about Mindy Kaling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
She's Mrs. Who. Yeah. So it was kind of a hodgepodge,
Mm-hmm.
honestly, because it was like all the topics that we weren't sure where they were going to fit. So we just threw them all in.
And
But it's fine.
I think a free form discussion as an opener is a good thing. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, that was last time. I was promised creatures
Yes.
in this
Creatures.
installment.
And planets.
Creatures
And
and planets.
creatures and planets.
And space travel. What is this? Star Wars?
What is this? Star Wars. And we're also going to talk about an exploration of what genre even is this?
Genre.
What do we even call
Yes.
it?
And I think that maybe through your discussion of the creatures and the planets and the tesseract,
Mm-hmm.
that might kind of form some kind of
Mm-hmm.
foundation for us to start to determine what genre we're dealing with here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we'll see. We'll see, viewers, listeners. Let us know what conclusions you come to about what genre this is.
Yeah.
Because I'm curious.
Because, creatures are of fiction, but they're also of sci-fi. But then tesseracts are very distinctly scientific in geometry and that kind of thing. And you can't have a wrinkle in time without a tesseract. So, yeah.
It's also connected to the Marvel universe.
It is.
And that's what I was kind of hoping that we would see in A Wrinkle in Time 2018 was that, like, at the end, like, Thor would show up or something.
Yeah.
You're like, hey, by the way,
yeah,
you got a Tesseract. Or Nick Fury. That would have been better, I think.
That would have been great.
Like, I mean, they're both made by Disney. It was right there.
It was right there. And
yeah.
I'm going to try my best not to talk about Arcane when I talk about Marvel Tesseracts, because there's a similar thing in Arcane, but it's a circle, not a cube. But we'll get there. We'll get there.
Okay.
We're going to go full nerd this episode.
Let's do it.
So
I'm not even gonna misquote Arthur C. Clarke this time.
You always can.
I bet he deserves to be misquoted. Okay, go on.
Okay, so we thought we would start the top of this episode with talking about some of these creatures, because
now that we're 9 minutes in.
We're 9 minutes in. Because, like, I've been studying this book for like 20 years of my life, and I learned new things just in prepping for this episode. Like, it is a world that is rich, and like we've talked about, I think we were talking about it with the Witcher, Madeleine L'Engle,
which also has some interesting creatures.
Which also has some really interesting creatures. The world and all of the contents of the world are not handed to you in Wrinkle in Time. You got to figure it out, which makes for better storytelling, right? So, I started my discussion with IT because it's kind of the driving force behind the problem of this whole world. And IT, I wanted to ask you.
Is it Pennywise the clown?
Oh, yes. Oh, gosh. Oh, no, thank you. I wanted to see if you remembered how you visualized IT or it when you read the book.
The book describes it as a giant brain.
Mm-hmm.
So I picture like I pictured like the room that Meg goes into is like a very stark
Uh-huh.
like laboratory
Uh-huh.
with like a metal table, like a metal like lab table
Yeah.
with a huge brain on it.
Okay.
That was what I pictured.
That's what I pictured too. And then it's very
Yeah.
interesting that in the movie, I loved this. In the 2018 movie, Charles Wallace is physically inside like a brain. So I thought that was cool. That was like a really
Mm-hmm.
neat picture of it. I envisioned it the same way, this kind of sterile, like brain in a box, almost as if you were at
Or
like
like in a jar or something.
yeah. Oh
Yeah.
gosh. But I really liked the thought process that Charles Wallace would be walking around like a brain. That was cool in the movie. But according to the wikis, IT or it is a bodiless telepathic brain that dominates the planet of Camazotz. While IT usually speaks through one of its pawns, it can also speak to people telepathically. So um, it can just enter the thoughts of Meg as you read the book, which was really freaking terrifying when I was reading that as a kid. Um, and its IT is entirely responsible for everything that happens on Camazotz. There's also Camazotz is also described, I think, by Mrs. Whatsit as a planet of swift changes or of like oh shoot a planet that changes its landscape very quickly, so we go
Mm-hmm.
from, and that's IT is responsible for that. So first we get that very suburban Stepford um image
Mm-hmm.
of the mom.
That was what that was
Oof.
what terrified me as a kid.
Oh yeah, completely.
Like, yeah.
So scary. With the bouncing of the red balls as they're bouncing them, which in the 2018 movie you hear a similar noise, and all of the children on the playground on Earth are playing with red balls and they make a similar noise. But then when you get to Camazotz, that noise is made louder and more eerie and kind of distorted a little bit. That gave me chills. Really, really great, great, great job. Um, so IT is kind of an all-knowing, all-sensing kind of corner of evil, really, that can get in your thoughts and in your actions. It fully takes over our friend Charles Wallace, um, and also works directly with another big bad scary, the man with the red eyes.
Mm-hmm.
In the 2003 film, the IT or it, however you feel, is directly linked to the man with red eyes. They're the same, but that's different in I don't think it should be that way. I think that they're two different entities, but yeah, in 2003 they made the two one. Um and the man with the red eyes is up next. Um Again, terrified me as a child.
Terrifying. Yeah.
Um
The prime coordinator. What?
when he starts
What is this?
reciting the numbers, and then Charles Wallace just starts to also recite them, and then they're like logged together, and then Charles
Yeah.
Wallace becomes evil and loses all of his childlike kindness. Oh, what storytelling. Oh my goodness. But uh, to define the character, the man with red eyes is a front for IT. He interacts directly with the children and kind of makes Charles Wallace join them and kind of takes over his brain. Um, yeah, the prime coordinator. Oh, using math for evil. Oh my goodness. Ugh.
I knew math was evil. I knew
I
it.
know. So those are kind of the biggest baddies, I think, of this. It's
Mm-hmm.
interesting to have a novel where a human brain and like principles of math are the evil. It's so interesting. I love this book. Um and then we have the Black Thing. If we move to kind of more in universe thoughts on evil, the Black Thing is a formless, shadowy being and is said to be kind of a source of all evil in the universe. So, as we first get into the universe, as we leave Earth and first get into the universe, Meg and Charles Wallace and Calvin say, "Oh, what's that?" And the three Mrs. W's explain kind of that the Black Thing is taking over the universe and that it's just the idea of evil kind of in a black cloud.
It kind of reminds me of the shadow folds in Shadow and Bone,
Yeah.
like where like darkness is a place and it's spreading,
Yeah.
and we have to, gotta fight the darkness.
Absolutely.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Ugh, so good. Um, and so that's a very meta thing, right? It's a black cloud in the universe. But there are also like creatures, more specific creatures that we don't get to see in the movie. There are the beasts, Aunt Beast,
Mm-hmm.
who's never given a name, but Meg calls her Aunt Beast. Um, and Aunt Beast is a character. So, for those who have only seen the movie and have not read the books, Aunt Beast is a protector character. She takes Meg when she's stranded on a brand new planet and very sick and possibly dying. Aunt Beast comes and kind of almost takes her into like, I don't know, she has telepathic abilities and she also has like waving tentacles, and it always reminded me of like a womb or like a yeah, very like visceral form of healing and kind of returning to a womb. Uh in order
I when I first read the book, I imagined the beasts, well, the creatures who live on Ixchel.
Sure.
Um, is that how you say it? I imagined them looking like Wookiees. Um,
Uh-huh.
and that is how in the so this scene is in the 2003 adaptation, and they do kind of look like Wookiees.
Yeah.
So I'm like validated there. Yeah.
They always seem to symbolize to me like feminine healing, with the tentacles. It
Mm-hmm.
always reminded me of like a womb space. So like female identifying healing. It doesn't have to, you know what I mean? But yeah, so it's Aunt Beast is a six-armed, eyeless, gray or fuzzy brown creature with telepathic abilities and numerous long waving tentacles, um, and is very much a healer on the planet, on a very cold planet called Ixchel. Yes.
Extra.
Yeah, yeah,
I don't
sure.
know.
Um, and Duvernay did try to incorporate this scene into the film, and she found that it just did not match with the flow of the movie as a whole, which I understand.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
I think in books you have more of a chance for like secondary danger and tertiary danger and kind of
Mm-hmm.
those things, but in a movie it kind of has to all lead up to like the big scary, um so I understand that.
Yeah, it kind of cuts the climactic tension that
Yeah.
you've built by going to this place, and then Meg goes back. and it doesn't quite.
Yeah,
I could see that not fitting in a movie.
totally. Um, on the official Wrinkle in Time wiki does also mention the happy medium as a distinctly alien character. So the happy
Mm-hmm.
medium is not humanoid. It is alien, and as we
Well,
meant,
she appears human, like
right,
she's human in appearance,
right,
but you kind of get this sense that like she can kind of manipulate her form,
yeah,
and so she's appearing human because the kids are human and it makes them comfortable.
right, right.
But yeah, she kind of
She's
yeah.
And I thought this was interesting. It described the happy medium as, let me find it here. Oh, as kind of not necessarily good or bad, but even, like evenly rational, and a happy medium. So it
Mhm.
makes sense. Yeah, she uses her powers to kind of see other people and see um gain knowledge of like people and places across the universe. She's pretty cool. So we have your aliens, we have your brains and your your big evil brains, but we also have
Love those.
love a big evil brain. Um
Love a big evil brain.
But if we're talking about this universe, we also have to talk about the planets themselves.
Mhm.
Because location and setting are very much used to tell this story as well. Um, so, I mean, all stories use it, but I think we're playing with things like 2D, 3D, 4D, and sometimes 5D. So the location matters in kind of a unique way. So we have a few planets to go over. So Uriel or Uriel, I don't know how you want to pronounce that. Um,
I always said it Uriel.
Me too.
Uriel.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah. I think of the name Muriel, you know? So Uriel.
Muriel.
Um,
Muriel's Wedding.
yeah,
I love that
exactly.
movie.
Toni Collette.
Toni Collette.
Oh, we love her. So
We do.
the planet of Uriel is the first one that they visit, and it is lush and perfect and natural. It has these gorgeous rolling hills and greenery, and it's kind of like a planet of natural perfection. Before we launch into all these scary things, as a first, um, as a first way of viewing the universe, um, it makes sense that the Mrs. W's would take the children here first because
Mhm.
it's kind of perfected. Well, it's what we find on Earth, but a little bit perfected. A favorite part for me in this natural landscape is the flowers, who Mrs. Whatsit
Mhm.
describes as the original gossipers of the universe, which I just always thought was really sweet.
I
Um,
also like the part in the book where they have the flowers that help them breathe when
yeah,
they like go up too high in the atmosphere, and they can't breathe the air anymore, and so they hold up the flowers. It's like, oh,
yeah.
that's so cool. I love that. A
Oh,
natural solution.
yeah. I don't know. I love that part of the book also. Um, it was interesting to note that the 2018 movie filmed these scenes in New Zealand because there was a drought in California at the time. So they got to go to New Zealand, which I can't think of a better place to film these than, like, if you're thinking of natural perfection, you're gonna go New Zealand. Um,
Hmm. New Zealand is where you go to film fantasy.
yeah,
Everyone knows that.
absolutely. Uh, our planet Uriel was specifically filmed at Lake Hawea in Otago. If you ever want to like go visit, which I really do. That would be
Me
really cool. That would
too.
be so cool, right? Um,
Yes.
so
Top
that,
DNA on the road
yes,
in New Zealand.
let's go.
Let's do it.
Um, so
We could just move there.
yeah, let's just go right now. It's fine.
Just,
It's fine.
yeah. Their prime minister is super cool.
Yeah, my uncle lives
Well,
there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yes, let's do it. Okay.
So you go from
Anyway.
you go from this kind of perfect planet to a few different planets. You visit Orion, which we only see as kind of the Happy Wisdom's cave. So we don't see much of that planet necessarily, but we do see kind of your kind of natural cave. Your what you think of when you think of a cave. That's where Happy Medium lives. So that's the planet of Orion. We don't spend a lot of time there. And then we get to in the movies we don't visit this place at all, but in the books there's the planet of Ixchel, which is where the beasts live and where Aunt Beast lives, and it's just a freezing cold wasteland. Like
It's Hoth.
exactly, yes, it is Hoth. It's kind of desolate. It's not a good time.
No.
But it houses these very loving and very sweet characters. It shouldn't be surprising that the beasts are some of my favorite. I love them. And then, my friends, we get to Camazotz. Camazotz, which is not the same as Camelot.
A law was made a distant moon ago here.
Yes.
It's Camelot.
It's Camelot.
Camazotz.
Camazotz.
I wonder if that was if she intentionally chose
right
a name that kind of sounds like Camelot.
Right. I could like. I don't think anything is accidental. I wouldn't.
Oh no.
Especially because of what we talked about in the Camelot episodes about like this idea of perfection, and you see like the suburban gross perfection in the beginning. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think you're onto something with that.
And Camelot, what is kind of viewed as like this golden age, like this utopian society.
Yeah.
In legends.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe yeah. I had never made that connection before, but maybe.
Yeah. And I think it's also important to note that in the 2018 film, Camazotz reflects to a terrifying, like, it's just oh gosh, it's viscerally like terrifying, right? And it's the evil planet in the world of Wrinkle in Time, obviously. IT is in charge of all of it. Oh, great. I do have the quote. It's called A World of Many Faces because the landscape changes in order to be interesting or alluring to the children. So it starts as this Stepford suburbia where there's also something to be said of sensory processing on this planet. Like all of so we see these suburban Stepford wives calling to the children to come and get like a meal, and we see children playing with red bouncing balls all in unison, and the sound of that kind of penetrates all of the children, all of Meg and Calvin and Charles Wallace's brains, kind of that really awful rhythmic like mimic of a heartbeat, but in a very distorted, eerie, you don't want to hear any more of it type way. Which reminds me of how it might feel if you experience a sensory processing disorder with sounds. How just you can't focus because like that noise is so awful. So I thought that was a really neat. I love this movie. I love how they made that sound just so all encompassing. And then it also switches to like a really overcrowded beach with like a decadent spread of food that just tastes like, once they've eaten it, just tastes like sand. Ugh, gosh. So, and that's of course where
I don't
um
like sand.
no, not really.
It's rough and coarse, and it gets everywhere.
Yeah. Ugh.
I think I messed that up a little bit. I was quoting
Yeah.
Attack of the Clones. It's fine.
Mrs.
Don't worry.
Mrs. Who over here. But Rhonda, how do you get
Yes.
to these planets?
A spaceship?
No.
No? How do you get there?
A tesseract. You must tesser.
Tesser. I love the use of tesser as a verb.
I know.
It's time to tesser.
We must tesser. Oh dear. So as we get through the beginning of the story, we learn that the central problem is that Meg's father, Dr. Murray, and Mrs. Murray have made this discovery about tesseracts and their existence in the universe. And as they further explore it, it was originally Mrs. Murray's discovery, and then Dr. Murray works with her on it. And he eventually gets transported into danger because he continues to explore this idea and maybe tries one. I think he tries a tesser, and then that's what traps him? Question mark.
Yeah. He didn't really know what he was doing.
Right.
He was just like, let's go for it.
Yeah. And I think there's even a part in the movie where as he comes back where he says to Mrs. Murray, I didn't follow your notes, or I didn't heed your warning, which I just thought was a really important piece of that Mrs. Murray kind of knew that this might happen and he did it anyway. So that's important. So what exactly is a tesseract? I had no idea when I read this. I was like, what on earth? What is this? So Elena Nicolau wrote a piece on exactly what a tesseract might be. It's a really good article. Good. We can link it because it really helped me figure it out. She wrote for Refinery 21. But in the book, so Meg's brother, Charles Wallace, explains the first, like the dimensions. And so that's kind of a helpful entry point. So the first dimension is a line. The second dimension is a square. The third dimension is a cube. The fourth dimension is time. Kind of takes a big jump there. And then the fifth dimension is a tesseract. And it's the travel of space and time. It's how they connect to one another. And then there's a planet, which I don't believe got a name, which is a 2D planet, where Mrs. Witch like mistakenly takes them. She says, "Oh, oops, this is 2D. We can't be here." And so there's a description of the children being suffocated into a dimension that they don't belong. So that's how this idea is introduced in the book. So you go to the 2D planet where you physically cannot be, and then you luckily leave that universe pretty quickly. And that fifth dimension is the tesseract, which allows for travel between space and time. To directly quote Langle, you see, Mrs. Whatsit says, if a very small insect were to move from the section of a skirt in Mrs. Who's hand to that in Mrs. Who's right, I'm going to start this over. You see, Mrs. Whatsit says, if a very small insect were to move from the section of skirt in Mrs. Who's right hand to that in her left, it would be quite a long walk for him if he had to walk straight across. Swiftly, Mrs. Who brought her hands, still holding the skirt, together. Now you see, Mrs. Whatsit said, he would be there without that long trip. That is how we travel. So it's when you fold a picnic cloth or a blanket, it's taking from very far away directly to the space.
And it's so like I I love that it still doesn't explain how they do it.
I
It's just
know.
like they explain how it happens, but they don't explain how you actually do that.
I know.
And if you could see me at 10 years old trying to figure out how to tesser, um,
Uh-huh.
that is a thing that happened. Yeah.
It's similar in Wheel of Time. There's a thing called the ways, which is how you get from one
Oh,
way to
yeah.
another way. So
I just
that's
finished the second episode of the TV show. So
love it.
it's good. It's good.
Love, love.
I'm never gonna read the books, but I'm liking the show.
They're so good. But yeah, this is a thought process that happens in Wheel of Time as well. It also, in a very different way, happens in Marvel. So we
Uh-huh.
talked about this a little earlier, but in Marvel, a tesseract is more akin to the specific geometric meaning that it has. So in geometry, a tesseract is like a square. So is a cube. Yeah, it's like a
Mm-hmm.
Here's a specific
It's
quote.
a cubed cube
Right.
is how they describe it in A Wrinkle in Time.
Of
But
like
yeah, it's
unlimited power. That kind of
uh-huh.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A hypercube.
A
A cube within
hypercube.
a cube.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And we see it. So Nick Fury describes it as power, if we can figure out how to tap it, maybe unlimited power. So it's just a very,
Hmm.
it's like a Rubik's Cube, but important.
Are you saying Rubik's cubes aren't important?
Not at, well, so now I take it back. um,
Hmm. Okay.
and in
We'll
Arcane, there's
see.
a sphere that's the same thing.
Okay.
But thank you for coming to my TED
See,
Talk.
this is why it would have been so perfect to connect A Wrinkle in Time to the Marvel universe.
Yeah.
Because you've got the Tesseract.
Yeah.
It would have made so much sense.
Yeah.
Anyway, I digress.
So that's that.
That's that. But there so as we said at the beginning of this episode, Erin was going to lay out some evidence for us.
Yeah.
And then we're going to try to decide if A Wrinkle in Time is fantasy or science fiction, or is it something else or some combination.
Right.
And I think it's interesting that you brought Marvel into this because Marvel very similarly has elements of both science fiction and fantasy.
Right.
Because we have powers coming from science and technology, and we have powers that are coming from like the like divine powers of gods and magic and
Right.
things like that too. So it's interesting that we have that another connection.
Yeah.
That was not capitalized upon, and I'm starting to get a little mad about it. So when we're looking at A Wrinkle in Time, I guess I've kind of already given away what my answer is about what genre this is.
Uh-huh.
But maybe you've come to a different conclusion. So, is A Wrinkle in Time science fiction, fantasy, or something else? So, we have a lot of elements of science fiction, which you just talked about. We have space travel, we have theoretical physics.
Yeah.
In a children's book. It's great. We have extraterrestrial species. And then there's also an element of dystopian fiction, like fighting to end this authoritarian regime.
Yeah.
to in my notes I put to rival the Hunger Games.
Uh-huh.
It's like because we have uh the central intelligence is like the capital in the Hunger Games, right?
Right.
Anyway, um, okay, but then there are also a lot of elements that don't fit into science fiction framework as we would traditionally define it. So, like the tesseract, the act of tessering, it's never really explained in a scientific way. You know, we have like
Right.
in science fiction that incorporates like light speed travel, they always have some kind of there's always some kind of like scientific sounding explanation that like,
Yeah.
oh, we invented this special kind of engine or this special kind of fuel that allows for this kind of travel. But that's not the case with tessering or with the tesseract. Like we just kind of accept, oh, okay, like they just do it.
Yeah.
Um, and then also the misses themselves. How you know what kind of creatures are they? Do we ever see them in their true forms?
Right.
How are they able to change forms? Are they supernatural beings? Are they, just extremely powerful natural beings? Is there scientific? Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and then also we have in A Wrinkle in Time, we have kind of a general emphasis on like abstract and mystical forces of good and evil that we don't usually get in science fiction, except Star Wars. But Star Wars isn't science fiction either.
Right.
Um, so we could say that it's like science fantasy. Um, but Star Wars is also science fantasy. Uh, so I don't know if we want to say that A Wrinkle in Time is the same genre as Star Wars. I don't. I don't know. Uh, it has similar themes, I guess.
Yeah.
But anyway, so this question has been explored by other people before. So this is a blog called The Geek Mom. She decided to explore this question too.
I
And
reference her
so,
too.
oh, you did?
Yeah.
So she lays out this, she kind of takes it through, um, like this process of trying to define each element of A Wrinkle in Time, whether it fits into science fiction or fantasy. So, and she calls it the speculative fiction tesseract. So that's basically her premise that like we're not going to call it science fiction, we're not going to call it fantasy, we're going to call it speculative fiction,
Right.
which I like. So she says it's going to fall closer to science fiction than to fantasy, but not all the way. And she says it'll be toward the future side of the middle of the timeline dimension. So, like, it's not based in the past. She says it takes place in the contemporary near future, but that contemporary was pre the Beatles coming to America. So, it's got an old fashioned futuristic vibe. So, it's kind of a mid century future,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. She notes that the computing machines at Central Intelligence use punch tapes, which is a mid-century technology.
Right.
Right. So we'll stick with slightly future of contemporary-ish. Um, and then speaking of Camazotz, dystopian is the closest Wrinkle falls to one end of any of the dimensions we've looked at so far. Even Earth is considered shadowed. The existence of utopian Uriel and relatively happy Ixchel keep it from totally bottoming out in dystopian. So we have the idea of a dystopia, but it's not like the entire world or the entire universe of this book is dystopian.
Yeah.
The speculative elements are immersive enough to place it closer to the, let's call it the far out end of the realism spectrum. But our protagonists are ordinary, highly intelligent, but otherwise ordinary Earth people who have ordinary Earth problems, besides the whole dad stranded in another galaxy thing. So not too far out. Though the plot is suspenseful enough, the real focus is on the character growth. Meg's developing confidence, the relationships between her and her parents, her brother, and her new friend, possibly boyfriend. And then she concludes, as for large scale versus small scale, well, that's the point of the book, isn't it? Good versus evil is a huge scale deal happening throughout the universe and over eons. But in this story, Meg learns that even rescuing one scientist and one little boy from evil's clutches is important enough. Even an awkward nerd girl who keeps doing everything wrong can be as much of a hero as a celestial being. So, large scale or small scale, it's both. Um, yeah.
I love that.
Uh, yeah. So I like that we don't really get a definitive answer
Right.
there either, which fits with the theme of the book.
Yeah.
And then I also wanted to look at another a particular element of science fiction that we find in A Wrinkle in Time, the idea of dystopia and utopia, because we have both a utopia and a dystopia in A
Yeah.
Wrinkle in Time. And this is, something that, is explored a lot in science fiction and fantasy. But I think we think of it as more of a science fiction concept.
Yeah.
But as I was rereading A Wrinkle in Time fairly recently, I was kind of struck by how Langle's work reminds me a lot of Ursula K. Le Guin and vice versa.
Okay.
I haven't read a lot of Le Guin, but what I have read of her, I see a lot of parallels and connections between her and Langle.
Yeah.
Especially Le Guin's story, The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, which is probably like her most famous. Like, I think everybody reads it in middle school.
Uh-huh.
So have you read it?
I haven't. I've heard a
Okay.
lot about her, but I haven't read anything of hers.
Okay. Yeah, so The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas is really there's really like no like plot to the story. It's more of a thought experiment. But it's about this utopian future society in which everyone is cared for, like there's enough resources and food for everyone. Everyone's generally pretty happy. But the catch is that in order for this to be possible, a child must be kept locked in a dungeon, abused and neglected. And the citizens of Omelas know that the child is there, and they eventually, like, every citizen has a point where they learn about the child, they learn about this Faustian bargain that's been struck to enable their perfect lives. But the story says if anyone helps the child, their society will be destroyed and this perfect world will come crumbling down and no one will have a good life anymore.
Yeah.
And so no one does anything to help the child. There if they find that they can't continue to live in this society, their only option is to leave, to just walk away, which is where the title comes from, The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas. And so this is like, I think more than the idea of a utopia, I think this is more a critique of utilitarian ethical philosophy, which I wish that I had talked about this story when we talked about The Good Place, because this would have been a great,
Right.
it would have fit right into that discussion. But in essence, the citizens of Omelas have chosen the greater good over alleviating the suffering of a child.
Right.
Which kind of calls into question, like, is the greater good really worth it?
Right.
If this is the cost, which I find really interesting. But the descriptions of Omelas in the story are very sparse, but they evoke images that, reading now as an adult, remind me a lot of Camazotz.
Yeah.
Omelas is initially posited as a utopia, and Camazotz is very clearly a dystopia. but they're similar in that the seemingly perfect harmony of these societies comes at a great cost. In Camazotz, the people are being controlled by it, and any deviation from their like perfectly synchronized, pre-scripted patterns are met with harsh punishment. We don't know exactly how harsh that punishment gets, but we know that,
Yeah.
it's not good. And then Omelas, in a sense, is just as controlled as Camazotz. It's controlled by the people's fear of losing their perfect lives if they question the status quo. So Omelas and Camazotz both rely on the compliance of their citizens to perpetuate this order that's been established and this illusion of this perfect utopia. But their citizens ultimately suffer under that order and under that hierarchy.
Yeah.
It's interesting to think, I think it's interesting to think of these two societies in comparison to each other, because Camazotz is so clearly a dystopia, because we see it through Meg's point of view, and she's an outsider to that society.
Yeah.
But with Omelas, it's really also a dystopia. It's not a utopia.
Yeah.
But we're introduced to that element of it more gradually, because like we're looking at Omelas from more of a neutral, I guess, point of view.
Sure.
Initially. But I was curious, like, what if we saw Omelas from the view of the child? It would be very different.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's just interesting to look at these two works side by side and see like kind of the same, not exactly the same, but just like that very similar idea of like how much of your autonomy, how much of your humanity are you willing to give up to, have, the security or the luxury that societal hierarchy can offer.
Yeah.
And I mean, like with the people in Camazotz, like I don't know how voluntary their participation in the society is.
Right.
We get the sense that they're like pretty much completely controlled.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I just wonder.
Yeah.
I want to read like, this is gonna sound kind of weird, but like I want to read like the Camazotz written in like a novel for adults.
Yeah.
That would like explore that a little bit more.
Sign me up.
I'm curious.
Absolutely.
Yeah. As we wrap up, I just wanted to include this. I don't think that this discussion would be complete without also mentioning N.K. Jemisin's short story, The Ones Who Stay and Fight, which is, it's from, I think, 2018, and it's kind of in conversation with Omelas.
Okay.
And kind of a reaction to, I wrote a blog post about it a few years ago that we can link for anyone who's interested in reading. But it's kind of in conversation with this idea of like what it really takes to keep a utopian society utopic
yeah
utopian, and it kind of proposes another perspective in looking at how that's perpetuated. So please go read that story.
Yeah.
It's a really great story. That whole collection, How Long Till Black Future Month, is excellent. Anything by N.K. Jemisin is excellent.
Yeah.
But please go read that. But yeah. Woo.
Yeah.
That's hey folks, we're super cheery.
Yeah.
Fine family fun.
Yes. I would also.
But yeah, yes, go on.
Oh, I would also, I think, because it was the time that it was, I think there's a very specific gender dichotomy in this work also. And I think that would
Yeah,
also
absolutely.
be really interesting to remove that dichotomy and explore this world with the knowledge that we have that gender is fluid. I think that would also be
Mm-hmm.
a new lens to look at this world through. We should get to
Because like in the book, it's like all of the boys have balls and all of the girls have jump ropes.
yeah,
Is that what it is?
yeah.
Yeah, but I think in the 2018 movie, don't they kind of mixed it up? Like some of the
Hmm.
girls had balls, some of the boys had jump ropes, I think.
Yeah, and like it starts to happen in the 2018, and I think we could take it a step further, and that's something I want to see.
But I think it's also like I think we could also view that aspect of Camazotz where it's this very like rigid gender structure,
Hmm.
like that is part of the forced conformity
Right,
of this society.
right.
So like I don't necessarily think that it like I think as long as it's made clear that like that's, you know, kind of that's intentional
Yeah,
in keeping that gender binary
yeah,
in that element, that it's because this is a forced structure on our society,
yeah,
as just as Camazotz is forcing people to conform to these prescripted roles.
yeah.
It's which like that's kind of a lot to communicate in a kids movie, but like
Right, right.
I think that you could make the argument for keeping that in there, you know.
Yeah. I want to see, I guess I want to see more of it in like other places in the world once we leave Camazotz,
Yeah,
that kind of thing. But yeah, absolutely. Oh, this whole piece is so good. I'm a fan.
it's really good. Yeah, I like it a lot. I like it a
I
lot.
like it a lot.
I do want to if there was ever like okay, so there this is inspiring me to recommend some science fiction that explores gender and
Yeah.
gender like binaries and forced structures. So Ursula Le Guin also wrote The Left Hand of Darkness,
Hmm.
which has some ideas of gender. Um, you know, like yeah, it's in there. And then there's also Anne Leckie. I always forget how to pronounce the word. It's ancillary or ancillary justice.
Yeah.
um, is also very interesting ideas about how this spacefaring society structures their gender.
Yeah.
Um, and then also I would recommend An Unkindness of Ghosts by River Solomon.
Uh-huh.
Um, Solomon is non-binary,
Hmm.
and their main character is as well.
Yeah.
Um, and so that, and it's a science fiction as well. So
Yeah.
we'll put those book recs somewhere, maybe on Instagram.
Yeah.
Yeah, check those out. Anyway, okay, what are we?
Yeah.
Which leads us to follow us on Instagram.
Follow us on the Instas. So next week we're gonna go into more of a discussion of the movie and also maybe some of the reviews that it got, and a discussion of why it's important to have scary things available for children, because it's important.
Basically, we're gonna talk about who is this for?
Who's this
Who
for?
is A Wrinkle in Time for?
Yeah,
That's what we're gonna talk about. Yeah. So that'll be interesting.
we have opinions.
We do.
Yeah.
And we're excited to talk about them.
We are.
Yeah. So join us for that.
Yeah.
We have been talking for an hour, so we should probably
So
go now.
you're welcome. And
You are very welcome, indeed. All right,
okay.
friends. We'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye.